All right, Inspired Leaders and Teach Better Family. I am beyond excited for my guest today. He has got a long resume, and I can't wait to dive into that. So, Jerry Kolber is an accomplished entertainment professional known for his work as a co-creator and showrunner of National Geographic's #1 series, Brain Games, for which he received his Primetime Emmy nomination. His extensive experience includes collaborations with iconic folks like Pharrell. I can't believe that's even on the list of things. I mean, he's a brilliant musician. I'm super excited to talk about that. And then his extensive experience also includes, being with the Brainchild Netflix documentary produced with Pharrell. And then, of course, he's got some other upcoming documentaries that we're probably going to touch on at the end of our conversation. So with that, he's also got a wonderful kids educational podcast, Who's Smarted, and it's got over 15 million downloads in his first 3 years. So super excited to talk about that project. And obviously you're linked to a lot of other things with A&E and Mythbusters and Netflix. So Jerry, with all that being said, thank you so much for being on Inspire to Lead.
Thanks for having me here, Josh. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's dive into it, Jerry. I mean, good night. I just listed off like 10 different things that most people would dream to be associated with. So would you just share a little bit about your background and how on earth did you, get to be on such these just phenomenal educational projects?
Sure. Yeah. So my background, I actually studied theater and film at NYU. And I, through a series of strange events, ended up working on a TV show back in the 1990s and loved it. And so I stuck with television for a while, but I was mostly working on scripted shows. I actually was like the production accountant on Sex and the City. And I worked for Dick Wolf for a few years. But I always knew that I wanted to create entertainment that was educational in some way. I just had no idea how that was going to happen. And I just always had that in my mind. And eventually, after 10 or 15 years of working my way up, doing all kinds of show running and production accounting and stuff like that, I had the opportunity to work with the team at National Geographic in New York. And as part of that work, we were working to create a new show about the human brain. And we wanted to do something really different and something that would be fun for people who didn't love science necessarily or think they could understand neuroscience. And I kind of raised my hand and I said, I'm your guy. I love science. I love learning how things work. But I was a terrible student in science and I was a terrible student in math in high school. I did not connect with how it was taught.
Sure.
The teachers were great. It was just my learning style. And so when we were creating that show for Nat Geo, I felt like we had an opportunity to create a show that was science for people who maybe think of science as like an S word, was how I kept putting it. And so we created Brain Games, and that show ended up becoming the biggest show in Nat Geo's history. That's where we got myself and my team got our Primetime Emmy nomination, and we ended up doing 7 seasons of that show. And it was just it was a phenomenal opportunity in the sense of like being in the right place at the right time, or maybe and also support from the network in terms of the marketing of the show. All of those things it was like the perfect storm. And so the success of that really just made it possible at that point for me to really focus on educational entertainment. And that is all that myself and my co-founder, Adam Tex Davis, and our team, that's all we've been doing for the last almost 15 years now. And so that one show really just kind of it proved the idea that you could make really, really entertaining content that was also educational if you really think about how to do it and how to make something really special for the audience. And so that's what we've been doing ever since.
So incredible. So you had touched on your experience as a student, and I'm always curious with this because there's so many folks that I talk to that have found great success. However, they did not find it in school. You had just mentioned just briefly that, you struggled in science, you struggled in math. I don't know if you were like me, but I struggled in pretty much all of my subjects growing up. So I'm curious just how you leverage that and, work through that in regards to resiliency to really create educational media for the brain. And then, showing that your brain could work differently and be successful in life.
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say that when I was in high school, I didn't really have the tools to work through it. I actually had to go to summer school to graduate because I did so poorly in math. And it was very frustrating for me because I was fascinated by numbers and science and how things worked. It wasn't until I started working in television and really thinking like, is there a way to approach the kind of the love that a lot of us have for how, I'm going to just call it like how things work, who are not good at understanding the way science is traditionally taught or math is traditionally taught. Was there a path to making something entertaining that would provide kind of a pathway and entry points for people to start to understand those things? And it really, I mean, that was an idea I had like 10 years before Brain Games, and I don't even think I was consciously thinking about it the whole time. But I did, the sort of light bulb moment for me was I happened to get hired by Children's Television Workshop in, I think it was probably late 90s, early 2000s. And they were developing a show using some of the Sesame characters to teach English to children in Asian countries. And so I got hired on this tiny team, and we made like a bunch of episodes of this show. And in that process, I got a really firsthand look at how Children's Television Workshop and Sesame Street thinks about education, and about how they used, they didn't make a TV show with Sesame Street. They actually used the format of television and the medium of television to do something that hadn't been done before and hasn't been done much since. And getting to understand the psychology of how that worked. And then I thought, this isn't that different. Like making fun games and getting people to lean in and asking questions and having them engage with the screen. Why would that be any different for adults than kids? And so there's a lot of that insight and a lot of what I learned from the amazing team at Children's Television Workshop that got baked into Brain Games. And I think, my resiliency was, I mean, I'm a very resilient person, and I think I become more resilient as a result of working in this wonderful television industry for the last 20 years. So
I
my parents, I would credit my parents with that. My folks were very like, do not let name calling get you down. Do not get frustrated if you can't figure something out, ask for help. So they were, my folks were great about, encouraging me to, I don't know if you want to call it resiliency, but just sort of curiosity and just not, I mean, it's sort of a cliched thing to say, but it's like, failure, you can only fail if you don't get up from the last time you fell, so.
Yeah. No, it's a perfect lesson for anyone in education, anyone being creative, anyone that's a leader. That's definitely something that you need to learn how to do, is be resilient, because you are going to face adversity. You're going to face failure. Real quick, I want to touch on, Jerry, just the creative space that you work in. And I know for myself, I'm writing a book, obviously creating podcasts, doing a variety of different things. And for me, and I don't know if this is for you too, is I'm always feeling like I lack energy. I don't know if that's something for you too. So
what do you mean?
For me, well, just, I'm looking for, ways to find like mental performance. I've tried different ways to like boost my energy through, different drinks, trying to exercise, be healthier with my, variety of ingredients. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think I've found a mental performance shot that is extremely healthy for you, which is called Magic Mind. So for those who have been listening for a long time, my Aspire leaders, that I only work with brands that I truly believe in. I love to integrate in my everyday life. So super happy to talk about Magic Mind real quick with Jerry. And so, my story as an administrator, and I don't know how you are, Jerry, but like when I'm busy, when I'm stressed, when I'm tired, I go for the convenient. I go for the easy, and typically that's unhealthy. So maybe that's a variety of different things that I used to put in my system. And, I might feel a little sugar high. I might feel that caffeine high, but eventually I would crash, and I crash hard, and I wouldn't be my best version of myself. So I started drinking Magic Mind for a couple different reasons. So one is it's a boost of energy, which I absolutely love. The second thing is it's got healthy ingredients. And the last thing is it's easy. It's something I can grab on the go, and it's small. So super excited to not only share about that, but, if you're an educational leader, if you're in just education in general, regardless of your title, I know that it is hard profession. And so if you're looking for something to give you all those things, highly suggest trying Magic Mind. And I convinced them, Jerry, to give a free promotion to my Aspire listeners. So I'm going to throw it up on the screen for those who are listening on or watching on YouTube. So if you want to try Magic Mind for free, you can go to this link. It's magicmind.com/aspire-to-lead-trial, and you'll get 3 bottles of Magic Mind for free. So you just need to go through the checkout, make sure you put in the code aspire-to-lead-trial, and Magic Mind will hook you up. And I promise you are going to see immediately the wonderful effects of this mental performance shot. So with that, Jerry, I want to talk about some of your projects that you've been just touching on a little bit. And I want to dive in a little bit harder, which is the Netflix Brainchild and the National Geographic's Brain Games. And, you know, if anyone has seen these programs, they know that you go through a lot of difficult topics. But then also, I don't even know how you do this, and maybe you can explain this. How do you go from, you know, these different topics, but also having this wide range of school-age children? Like, I feel like you can watch and you might be in elementary school, but also in high school, and still find relatable topics. So is that something that's really difficult, and how do you approach that?
Yes, so Brain Games was originally and always was really intended for adults, but we discovered very early on, like within the first few episodes, that from the research that a lot of kids were watching, and kids like 7, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
And so it didn't necessarily change the way we produce the show, but it did affect topics. So, by the way, I'm really excited to try Magic Mind. I love trying new things for energy. So I'm like, I will be
this really works.
Like, no, I'm like, I want it. Like, I'm ready.
I wish we were in person, Jerry. I would just like hand you a cold drink right now.
Magic Mind. I'm into it. So yeah, so we didn't change anything about how we made the show, but we definitely changed the topic. So for instance, we had an episode where we're going to do the how the sex in the brain. We're like, well, let's not do that. Let's do attraction instead. You know, just little tweaks like that. But the answer to your question of like, how do we make a show that appeals to all grades, especially with like a show like Brainchild, which is the Netflix series we did with Pharrell, that we hear from, you know, elementary school kids all the way up to high school kids that they love the show. We have discovered that writing the shows at roughly like an 8th or 9th grade level, using that kind of vocabulary and that level of detail, which is a very specific set of vocabulary and a certain way of thinking about how you write. That seems to work for pretty much all ages. It works for kids because, you know, whether you're 13, 14, 15, that's a language that you're comfortable with. Younger kids like it because it's aspirational, so they feel like they're getting to watch something that's a little grown up. And adults like it for a funny reason, which is most adults, when they're watching television, are not fully paying attention, right? So they're checking something on their phone, they're ordering dinner, they're cleaning up. And so again, like just that sort of magic sweet spot is sort of an 8th grade level seems to be the perfect level of writing where someone can keep following what we're talking about and not have to be paying like 100% attention. So we don't pretend that, like, you know, when you turn on Brain Games or Brainchild, maybe Brainchild, but Brain Games, we know most people are not necessarily like, you know, 100% there. So that's how we think about it.
No, I think that 8th grade or middle school mind is like a perfect place to kind of set in, because it does translate both areas. Being an educator in middle school for almost 20 years, I totally get that. I want to talk about something that also resonates specifically with my kids. Goodness, I absolutely love your podcast, Who's Smarted. It's edited beautifully. It's got fun things for the kids with like the variety of different sounds and songs that are in there. So for those who potentially have never listened to that podcast, I'd love for you just to share out about that project.
Oh, sure. So Who Smarted, we started during the pandemic as kind of a fun side project to help kids get off their screens all the time. It's audio, but it's entertaining and educational. So parents love it. So Who Smarted, it's a 3 times weekly show where we cover science, history, biology, space, popular culture, food, digestion, pretty much any topic that you can imagine in 15-minute shows that are scripted, very funny, very fast-paced. And so we call it the show that really sparks curiosity. And Who Smarted was also designed specifically to be fun for parents also, because so many kids shows are wonderful for the kids, but anyone over 20, you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot listen to this. So we wanted to design a show that was educational and fun for the kids that parents would love having on in the car rides. And like the number of parents we've heard from, I mean, we've literally heard from, hundreds of parents saying like car rides are now fun and calm because of Who Smarted. Bedtimes are easier. Homeschool parents love it. We have a huge homeschool audience because they use it as to introduce topics to their kids. And traditional classroom educators love using it for transition times. They use Who Smarted for transition, which is a term that I did not know until I started making Who Smarted. So
no, that's very important. As an administrator going into classrooms, I wish more teachers, really focus on that within the lesson plan, but our more veteran teachers are much better than some of our newer folks. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful idea to throw on a podcast while you're making that transition, and the kids don't get bored and don't get into mischief.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about that project a little bit more because, I mean, like I said, I've got 6 kids, so I feel like I'm just been stuck in like kind of elementary world, and I can throw that podcast on in the car, and the kids are great. They're attentive. They're not screaming at each other and acting a fool in the background. But then also there's a lot of like clarifying questions or something that they're intrigued about, and then that goes into some exploration on their own, which is pretty exciting to see as a parent. But I want to know about the connections that you've made. So, how have you built meaningful connections with children and their families through this wonderful podcast?
Oh man, that's such a great question. So, my producing partner Adam and I were actually just talking about this. So, we've made all these great TV shows with wonderful partners and wonderful networks, but nothing has been as satisfying and incredible as our experience has been with Who Smarted. It's the first time we've ever made something where not only are we producing it, but we're like distributing it, and we are directly responsible for the relationships with the listeners, whether they're reaching out to us on Facebook or leaving reviews or reaching out to us by email. And I mean, we get tons and tons of reach outs all the time. And it's turned into, this just experience of like community, I guess is the best way to put it. We've even, we just did an episode on autism and neurodiversity. That was something a lot of families have asked us for. And we always were trying to figure out the right way to do it. And eventually we realized, well, let's ask, let's see if there's anyone who would help us in our audience. And we ended up working with a family that has an autistic child who helped us actually, create the episode. We just did an episode on blindness and what's it like to be blind. And we co-created it with one of our young listeners who's blind. And so, these are like examples of like really, really working directly with the audience. But we just feel like we hear from the families all the time. We reach out to them. We know that we become a part that, Who Smarted has really become a part of the routine of lots of families. And so we just take that really seriously. And it just is a really nice feeling when you hear from families and parents and grandparents and homeschool parents that we've made their lives easier and, driven real curiosity with their kids. So that's been huge. It's huge.
Well, those topics are so important, and it's something that needs to be talked about. Unfortunately, like, someone will think of it as a sensitive topic and, oh, don't touch that. But however, it's something that all folks need to learn about. So, instead of shying away from it, let's lean into it. And I love that you're collaborating with kids and their families and really get into the heart of what's going on in their world and sharing that out. So kudos to you. Super pumped about, just the future of that podcast, because you've already done so much phenomenal work with Who Smarted. For those who, again, if you're watching on YouTube, you've seen the link. So you can go to whosmarted.com and you can obviously find the variety of podcast players, whichever one is your favorite, to subscribe and to listen. All right, I want to talk about maybe a different topic, but just some mindfulness practices in regards to just your work, because I mean, I think this really correlates to our leaders and those in education, because I mean, educators obviously need to be creative in what they're doing. They need to be innovative. So just curious about your practices as far as, what you've done to, help with your focus, resiliency, well-being? And then also, is there anything that you think translates over to our educators, our students, and our leaders?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I've had a mindfulness practice now for about 15 years, I'd say. I started back in the mid 2000s or late 2000s. And, there's times when I meditate every single day. Sometimes I don't do it every day, but I always, it's become a tool that I have that the more that I meditate, the more that I feel grounded and the more that I am able to focus. And I think what gets confusing sometimes for people is the idea that they sit down to meditate and their mind is racing and they say, I can't do this, this is not for me, my mind is just too many thoughts. And if someone were to say that to me, I would say that is lucky for you. Actually, I'm envious, because those thoughts are exactly what you need to practice, and that's why it's called meditation practice. You actually do want to practice just observing your thoughts. And so in a way, I actually said, like, I'm being a little funny, but it's like, if you didn't have any thoughts racing through your head, then you'd have nothing to practice with, right? And so the idea is, it's like, the meditation teachers will say, the idea of mindfulness is to sit and observe the river of thoughts going by, right? And just learn to sit with it and just be okay. And you can see the thoughts, you don't have to attach to them, just let them go by. And you start to notice, like, you're okay without attaching to and acting on every thought that comes into your mind. And our default mode as humans is to, thought comes in your head, you act on it. Or thought comes in your head, you go down the rabbit hole of the dark fantasy about the thing that might happen 5 years from now if you don't do something today. And all of a sudden you're having an actual emotional response. And so meditation for me, and I think, really the sort of goal of it is to create the ability to have just a tiny bit of space between the thought and then doing something with the thought, to where you can almost quickly decide, is this a thought I need to pursue? And when you're trying to focus and you have thoughts coming in your mind, just having that repetitive practice where you can say, almost to yourself, like, I don't need to follow that thought. I can stay focused on this, this project I'm working on. But it also comes in handy, very much so, I would think, for educators and administrators in dealing with a rowdy classroom or stressful, demands from the school district, or any of that kind of stuff that comes up at work. Like, it's kind of like meditation lets you realize you're kind of okay. Like, you're going to be okay, and you are okay right now. And you can, certainly you can still choose to get upset about something or frustrated or whatever, but like, being able to make those choices rather than just blindly sort of go into those emotions and those situations, I think it just has made me a healthier person.
Yeah, I love it, Jerry. So I want to expand on this just a little bit more, because I'm curious, because I've tried a couple times, but not nearly enough practice. I'm now inspired by what you're saying and needing to go back to it, because I think this is just something that's really heavy on a lot of educators' hearts right now and minds. Just the idea of stress, how to deal with it, and then also feeling that potential burnout. And I just did a keynote at a conference about the subject. I'm kicking off several school districts on this idea of mental health, mental wellness, taking care of ourselves. And so for meditation, I would love to dive into this even a little bit deeper. What does that even look like as far as just even your setting? Are you in a quiet space? Do you have music going on? Like, is that even something that is important? I guess I'm talking through an experience.
Yeah. So what's important with meditation is that whatever practice you choose feels comfortable for you, And so I was trained by a guy named Ethan Nichtern, who actually, he just had a book come out called Confidence, Holding Your Seat Through the 8 Worldly Winds, which is a book quite literally about what you're talking about. It's about, sort of holding your own self despite what might be happening around you. For obviously a very appropriate book for our times. And the training I got was really about sitting comfortably and then just focusing on your breath in and out through your nose. And that's basically it. When your mind wanders, just notice it wanders and go, I would say to myself in my head, oh, thinking or thought, and then just come back to the breath.
Okay.
That's a insight or vipassana meditation technique. But some people like to meditate with a little music. Some people do it with their eyes closed, eyes open. Some like a candle or an object. I tend to do it in the mornings in my apartment when it's quiet. But if I need to meditate during the day in my office, I just do it. Again, like having, like if you're, what I try to avoid is setting the bar of like I have to have like this very like kind of space for it, because then I'm never going to do it. And so I work with whatever's happening. When I say quiet apartment that I meditate in, I want to be clear, like my apartment is in the Lower East Side of New York City, so it's never actually quiet. Okay.
Yeah.
Like what I'm defining as quiet is not Colorado Springs quiet. Like it's
it's New York's got a total different energy.
Right. So like there have been times when I've gone and meditated in other places and I'm like, dang, it's so quiet. Like it's almost hard. But I would say don't get hung up on anything other than finding a way to do it, that you could do it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Even like, people get hung up on the idea like that you got to sit cross-legged or sit in a certain way. You can lie down and meditate. You can sit in a chair and meditate. You can walk and meditate. Like, well, don't do that with other people around because you'll bump into them. But,
Sure.
But like you could, whatever's comfortable for you is great. But I would say, like my mother was an educator, and she was very important in my life in terms of getting me excited about education and learning. But I also heard a lot from her about her experience as a teacher and counselor.
Sure.
And she absolutely loved it for most of her career. But the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years of her career, as things were changing in the education system and going in the direction they are now, she was becoming very frustrated with it, because it was becoming so much about testing and standards and rules and all of the, at the same time that kids are becoming more distracted and unable to focus, the joy was being taken out of being a teacher in terms of less latitude and less fun to be had in terms of how you teach kids. And I, from my friends and family members who are still in the school system, it sounds like it's just gotten worse in most cases. And so, I'd say any kind of practice, meditation or exercise or whatever, like anything you can do to just do some self-care as an educator is good. I mean, it's all good.
No, I love it. I also would say, for those who are interested, there's plenty of data out there in regards to, students that are not regulated with their emotions. Maybe they may had some misbehavior of actually, instead of sitting in like ISS, actually spend some time in meditation. And there's been a lot of benefits for students in that practice, in addition to what you're talking about, which I think anyone listening right now, I would love for you to try out meditation. And maybe we can just, have a charge for all of us that are listening, and for myself to try it out and to try to kind of free our mind of some of that busyness and that stress that you're talking about, because I think there's a lot of benefits, and the research shows that too. So
especially with kids, I mean, with adults as well, but any kind of acting out or insecurity or stress or anything you're feeling, it's almost by definition because you're uncomfortable with something in your current situation, right? And being uncomfortable means that things are not going in a way that you can process healthfully or process at all. And I know that's especially tricky for kids who don't necessarily have the tools or vocabulary for it, but the same for adults. And what meditation does is it actually, it allows you to see that you are okay, and that you have agency, that you are not your thoughts, that your thoughts are a thing that arise. And it's a very, I could see why that would be a very healthy practice for kids and teachers.
I mean, we got to teach beyond just the subject matter, right? So we got to find some ways to teach them how to make sure that they're working on their own mental wellness and health. So I think it's a practice that very much is universal. So with that, Jerry, I'd love to kind of end our conversation on an actual item, right? It's wonderful that they're listening to your wisdom and insights, but I want them to actually take some action on something. So for those who are potentially aspiring or current leaders, if there's something they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
Sure. It's a great question. I love the idea of reconnecting with play and fun. I think that gets lost a lot as we climb the ladders of leadership. the demands of reporting and planning and all of that, and things just start to feel like a grind. So especially with educators, I would say, like, if you are an educator and a teacher or an administrator, I can almost guarantee that when you started your journey into this world, it was because there was something you wanted to accomplish, and often that's linked to some kind of really transformational and fun experience that you had as a kid, right? And I think it's easy to lose that connection. So I would say a fun action item is, like, maybe sit down, grab a pen, take 5 minutes, journal to yourself about, or type if you want. Think about, like, what is it that inspired you to become an educator, and specifically look for, was there a teacher or an experience or a class that just gave you a sense of play and fun that also was educational, and, like, try to reconnect with that and see, is there something in that experience that you can bring into your current present reality that would allow you to have a little more sense of fun and play, and maybe even inspire some actions you can take. That's my spur of the moment action item for you.
No, I love it, Jerry. So wise. All right. So before we touch on how people can connect with you, is there any other projects that folks need to key in on as, the school year is about to begin?
Sure. Well, Who Smarted obviously is a great one.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We usually have another educational show that teaches kids about math and logic, called Mysteries About True Histories, that you can find on any podcast app. It's super fun. And then we're actually launching a project called Podcast Powerhouse that they can sign up for it's at podcastpowerhouse.com.
Okay.
Or maybe it's I'll get you the exact link.
Give me the link and I'll put it in the show notes.
But the idea is to empower people to be able to create their own podcasts, and whether that's, someone with a company or an educator, but also we'd like to help empower children to create podcasts, because when kids are given the opportunity to tell their stories, they get such a sense of agency, and it makes them really think about who they are, and it's wonderful. So we'd like to empower more of that. So.
Oh, love it. What a wonderful project. So yeah, make sure that you're checking out everything that Jerry is producing, creating, posting. So with that, Jerry, how can folks connect with you, either via website or on social media?
Sure. So on LinkedIn, I'm linkedin.com, Jerry, I think it's Jerry-Kolber.
Yep.
We are, Who Smarted is on Facebook. So that's easy. Just search Who Smarted there, and there's tons of stuff there. For Brainchild, I would say a great site is brainchildshow.com. We actually created curriculum that goes with Brainchild. That's the show on Netflix for kids, and there's curriculum for elementary school kids and middle school kids for the teachers to download for free at brainchildshow.com.
So cool. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. Obviously, Thanks. If you head over to joshstamper.com, you'll find those links also. You'll find the episode, and then you head over to YouTube to see this episode on my channel, Joshua Stamper, or over at Teach Better. And that's a growing community also. So make sure that you're subscribing, hitting the like. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to do so in YouTube. And then, of course, every podcast player, whatever is your favorite, you can subscribe and take a listen there. Obviously, Magic Mind, for all those healthy tips that we talked about in mindfulness, we can make sure that we're doing some Magic Mind too. And if you want that free, 3-drink pack, you can head over to magicmind.com/aspire-to-lead-trial, hit that code aspire-to-lead-trial in the checkout, and away you go with your wonderful, like I said, mental performance shots. So with that, Jerry, I am just honored. I'm so amazed by all the creative work that you're doing, and just an inspiration to so many. And I love that you're also taking this platform and just helping so many kids, students out there to be their best version of themselves. And with that, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you, Josh. It's been a real pleasure.